What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video we're going to go over creating a search field to search data that's already been loaded in our app. So as you can see here, we have 3 trips. If we do start to search for Boston, you'll see it is the only one that is left. If you go back, you'll see all of them are there again. If we type in Tennessee, that one will come up in the search results. One thing to note is we aren't directly searching Firebase here. We do already have all 3 of these trips loaded, so you can think of this search field more of a filter. If we just start typing in Ashburn, you'll see it is going to just pull Ashburn. We're never going to be able to search anything that isn't already preloaded here. So if that's a type of search that you're looking for, more of a filter search, then let's get started. Okay, so first let's add that search bar up at the top here. So in our build widget here, which is building out everything over here, you can see we really only have 2 components. One is the text and the other is this card list view. So right below the text is where we're actually going to put our search box, which is going to be a text field. This is going to be just a text field. And we're going to need a controller for this, which we will have to create, and this is just going to be called the search controller. And lastly, we could add a decoration for this, and the decoration can just be an input decoration, which will allow us to actually put an icon there, and we could do that as the prefix icon, and then do icon of icons. And we could find the search icon. All right, so now we need to create this, add a comma there, and we need to create this search controller. So if you go up to the very top, you notice we still have this as a stateless widget. First, we're going to also convert this to a stateful widget, and then within the state of this, we can now define the text editing controller. So this is going to be a text editing controller, and it's going to be called the search controller, and this is just going to be a text editing controller. So let's actually get the search controller set up a little bit more so that it actually is triggering when a character is typed in here. This actually would be better if we call it search controller with a capital C, so update that in both spots. All right, so now we need to add a listener for this search controller, which basically is going to say whenever the value in this search text field with this search controller is changed, we're going to call a function. So this can be done in the init state, and it will look like this. So search controller again is our text editing controller, and we're adding a listener, and then this is actually the listener, which is just going to be the function that we're going to call whenever this value is changed up here. So we're going to need to actually create that function, which is called onSearchChanged, or you can call it whatever you want. But this is a very simple function actually, and for right now we're just going to print out the text value in our search text field. So you can do that with the search controller.text. And so now if you save this and if you start typing something, you'll see we are getting that printed out down here. So that looks good. Another thing we're going to want to do is just to remove that listener and dispose of the controller when the page is removed, when we leave the page. So all that this is going to do is just clean up that listener that we created and basically remove the listener. All right, so this is good. Now we have a way to access what this value is here, and we are getting a way to trigger it every time the value changes. With this, what we really want to do now is filter out these results down here based on this value right here. So there are a few ways you can do this. The way that we're going to do it in this video and basically for the app is we're not going to make another call to Firebase. The reason for that is because we already have all the data that we want to be searching by. So depending on the way your app is set up or the way you have your page configured, this might not be the correct search solution for you, and you might actually want to be searching Firebase directly. Here's the difference. This page already has loaded every option that we want for the user to be able to search. We're never going to allow the user on this page to search something that isn't of one of these 3 trips right here. And because of that, we don't need to make a call to Firebase to relook up anything because we already have all the possible data that the user could be searching. So for instance, if we made a call to Firebase just for each of these search terms, it would be a waste in this case because we already have loaded all the potential data that could be returned from the search. So we need to load all this data and save it into a list, and then we can use that list to actually check our search value up here and see if that value matches what's in the list, and then just return that list. So I think it'll be easier to see as we go, but we are going to have to do a little bit of refactoring, and the first thing we're going to do is basically change the way our stream builder is working, and instead of using a stream builder, we're actually going to use a list view builder. And instead of getting our data in a stream like we have it here, we're going to just get our data to be returned as a list, and then we're going to save that list as a stateful variable on this view. So let's first refactor this function here. So we can keep the name of the function the same. I think that's fine. We are no longer going to return a stream of query snapshot, so just remove that. And then this is now going to become an asynchronous function. So add that there. We are not going to require the build context for this. So that looks good. So instead of yielding this here, we can actually set the results of this query here to be a variable, and we can call this the data. And this is actually going to be an asynchronous call, so this is what we're going to await on as well. And then this is going to get us our Firebase data. We no longer want the snapshot. We actually just want to get the documents. So if we call get documents now, it will actually return a list of those. It'll still return a snapshot, but it will be a snapshot of the documents. So once we have this here, we can now return the data here, and we can return the documents on that data. And this is going to actually be a list now. The documents of this data is going to be a list. So this now is going to be returning a list. All right, so you now might be thinking, since this is returning a list view, we can just call this function directly down in our build widget and do a list view builder. And while that would work, it's actually not a great solution, because really what we want to do is we only want to call this function one time, and then we want to set the state of a variable to have that list data in it, and then we can use that list in our list view builder down here. The reason this is better is because the build widget will get called multiple times throughout the stateful widget, and anytime anything is changed, the widget build will get called again. So it would be making that call to Firebase multiple times, which is not what we want. This is actually pretty simple to fix as well. All we have to do is create a new variable that we're going to store that list data in, and then we're going to call this function from our init state. We're going to create a new list, and this is going to be called all results. And this is what's going to house all of the results that we get back from here. And actually we want to say equals an empty list. So now we have this variable. When we're down here, before we can still return the document data, that's fine, but we're not actually going to use it, so you could just return anything there. We're going to actually set the state of this, set the state of that new variable, and it's going to equal that document data. So now that document data will be set in here, and we just now need to call this function here when the page loads initially. And by doing that, it will actually set that state, and then we'll basically have that data in this all results list. All right, so we are going to call this in a did change dependencies override. So that's going to look like this. And this is going to return a future, right? Because this is an asynchronous function, so this is going to have to be a future that we're returning. So because of that, we're going to create a new future variable, which is basically going to just tell us if this has been loaded or not. And we'll know it's loaded if this is returned. So again, it's not too important what's returned here. Like, this could just be complete, because this is only going to get returned once our await is done. So basically we're going to take this and take this function and set it equal to a new future variable, which is basically just going to be that that variable is loaded. So we'll call this a future, and we're just going to name it results loaded. And now we can use this results loaded, and we can call that here in the did change dependencies, and we can just call that function here and set the future value of this equal to that, and that will look like that. So this might seem a little bit confusing, but basically all we're doing here is, because this function here is asynchronous, it means we can't just call it initially. We can't just call it in the init state. And that's because this needs to make a call to Firebase and return, this data here. That's the only reason we have to do it this way. And we don't really want, but the problem is we don't really want our variable all results here. We don't want that to be a future. So if we were to, you might be thinking we could just set all results equal to the value returned from this function, but we don't want this to be a future. We want this to be just a plain list. So because of that, we created this results loaded future, which is basically just a flag that says this was loaded. So this is going to load up this data, but by calling this function, we're actually just going to set the state of that data list, this all results list. We're going to set that state equal to all of the data that is returned from this query. That setup is good. Hopefully that makes sense. But now we can use this all results and change this stream builder into a actual list view builder. So this is going to be, we can comment all this out actually and create a list view builder. And we are going to have an item builder, but we also are going to need the item count. And the item count is going to be that all results length, because again, that is just a list. And then for the builder here, we are going to need that build context, and then also the index. And here is where we can do what we were doing down here. So building the trip card. So instead of using the snapshot data document of the index, we're actually just going to use the list results index, because again, all of these list results are data documents from the snapshot. So we can just call all result here, and we don't need the semicolon there. Now we can delete this stream builder stuff. If you save this, everything should actually just work the same as it used to, which is good. So we were able to refactor this. Everything still works the same. The main difference now is we don't use the stream builder. We use the list view builder, and we have all of our data now. All three of these trips here are in our all results list. So now what we can do is we can create a new list basically that filters this all results list based on the search criteria here. Create a new list here, and we're going to call this the results list. And this will also be an empty list. Now this results list, and let me spell that right. So this results list is what we're actually going to use for the whole page. That's what we're going to use to display here. So we're going to go down and change this where we are using in the list view builder the all results, change that to be the results list. So now we need to set this results list to be, if you save this and rerun it, you'll see there's nothing now displaying here, which is actually what we want right now. So we need to create a new function, which is going to basically be it's going to be called from this on search change, and it's also going to be called when the page initially loads. So that's why it's going to be its separate function. And we can call this the search results list. So this is just going to be setting the second list here, the results list, to the values that we want from the results list. Basically, initially we can set the state of this, meaning set the states of this results list equal to the all results. So if you do this, hopefully you're following this. So if you do this and we call this function, you would now see that we will be getting all of those results loaded. So we are going to call this in two places. The first place we're going to call it is when we first get that data. So when we call Firebase for that data, we're going to call this function here, which is basically, as it is set up right now, it's going to set that results list to equal all the data returned from this function. Because again, that data is all going to be set in this state here. Then we're going to call this function, which is going to set the state of the results list. So if you do save this now and you go to the past trips, you'll see all of our trips are there again, which is good. We are also going to call this from our search. So that is going to be essentially the only thing we call from our search right there. If we didn't need to call this in the beginning, we wouldn't need to make this two separate functions, but because we are going to be calling it initially and after, we do have the two functions there. All right, so now we want to update our search results list function here to actually take into account the value that will be in this search box. So you can see right now we are always setting the state of the results list to that all results. So we're going to create a new variable here, which is actually going to be the show results. And these are going to be the results that we actually show in that list. So we're first going to check that search controller text is actually has a value. So we can actually do this with a not equal to blank. So this is basically saying if this is blank, or if this is not blank rather. So this means at this point in this block here, we have a search parameter. So then we can use an else here, and if we do not have a search parameter, this is essentially going to be our default. We're going to set this search results equal to a copy of all the results. So we can do list from and do all results. And now we can actually use this show results and return that down here. If you save this, we need a semicolon there. If you save this, it should operate the same as it was. We have everything there. And if we do type in a search parameter, you'll see everything blanks out. The reason for that is because we did not hit the else block when we typed in our text here. So nothing was actually saved to the search results, and it was just still an empty list there. So what we want to do here, now is add to this list if our search controller text matches what is in the trip title here. We need to iterate over all of our trips. So we can do that with a for loop for the list, which we can say for var trip in, and we're going to be going over all of the results. So over all the results. And then we can get that title variable based on this trip here. So this is actually a trip snapshot. So we do have a function already on our trip, which is from snapshot. So if we pass it a snapshot, it'll generate a trip object for us. So we'll call this the title, and we're going to be getting our trip from snapshot, and then we're going to be giving it this trip. Maybe we call this the trip snapshot and pass that in there. And now this is going to give us an actual trip object, so we can get the title of that, and then that should be our title of the trip, like Boston, Massachusetts right there. We are going to want to do a to lowercase on this because we're going to compare it to the value in the search box there. So now that we have this title, we can write a quick if statement that just says if this title contains, and we're going to be checking if it contains the search controller text, and we're also going to make sure we to lowercase that because we're comparing them. And if this title does contain the search controller text, then that means we're going to add this trip snapshot to our search results here. So search results is a list that we can add, and we will add this trip snapshot to it. All right, so if we save this and go back, everything looks good there. If we start typing a search term here, you notice when we just type the B, both of these are here, and that's because both of them actually do contain a B. If we type BOS and start typing out Boston, you'll see it only is the Boston trip there. If you go back to a cleared out version of it, you'll see we do have all the trips there again. Now we could just clean this up slightly by removing some of these comments and some of these print statements, but that is it. So now we do have a simple search working, and again, this is a search that's coming from data that's already loaded within the app. So we're really just searching over a list that has been generated from Firestore data, but we aren't making a call to Firestore every time we need to make this search. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. All right, ciao for now.